God never wasted a war. And the battles you skim through in the Old Testament, they weren't just history. They were strategy. Every enemy crushed, every wall brought down, every underdog victory was a blueprint for your life right now. David didn't beat Goliath with muscle, he beat him with faith. Jericho didn't fall through force, it fell through obedience and praise. These weren't just epic moments, they were manuals for modern war. You're not reading Sunday school stories, you're holding a spiritual war plan. And if you miss the pattern, you'll miss the power.
The blueprint idea. You thought it was just a story, but now you're starting to see it was a blueprint. These battles weren't random. They were designed, layered, patterned, intentional. Because before every move of God, there's always a strategy. And every one of them still works. Look closer. David didn't just show up. He waited until he was called to the battlefield. That's the first pattern. Timing over talent. Gideon, too many soldiers. God made him downsize. Why? Because the second pattern is this: faith over force. God doesn't need numbers, he needs trust. Then there's Joshua, marching around Jericho, saying nothing, not fighting, not attacking, just walking. It made no sense, but it was obedience. That's the next pattern: obedience before outcome. The Old Testament isn't just telling you what happened, it's coaching you on how to fight. Every breakthrough you need has a blueprint somewhere in those pages. It's not just truth, it's tactics. And the enemy hopes you never figure that out. Because if you did, you'd stop reading your Bible casually and start using it like a sword.
David versus Goliath. Faith over force. Everyone knew Goliath was unbeatable. Everyone except David. Because David knew something the others forgot. Giants don't fall by strength, they fall by faith. He didn't wear armor, he didn't carry a sword. All he had was a name, not his own, God's. While everyone else stood frozen by fear, David ran toward the roar. That's faith in motion. He didn't hesitate because he knew this wasn't his battle, it was God's. Here's the blueprint. Fear waits, faith moves. Giants shout, faith acts. Goliath had strength, David had source. And when faith shows up to the field, it doesn't need size, it just needs to swing. David's story wasn't about heroism, it was about alignment. He trusted God's name more than his own aim. And that's how giants fall, not by fighting harder, but by believing deeper.
Jericho. Obedience before outcome. What do you do when God tells you to march, not fight? To stay silent, not speak? To walk when you want to war? That's the story of Jericho. But it's more than a story. It's a test, a tactic, a spiritual strategy. Day 1, they walk. Nothing happens. Day 2, still nothing. Day 3, the enemy mocks them from the walls, and yet they keep walking. This is where most people give up, when obedience doesn't produce instant results. But they weren't walking by sight. They were walking by command. And that's the blueprint. Obedience, even when it looks pointless, is power. Because sometimes your breakthrough isn't delayed, it's building. Then came day 7. 7 laps, 7 times the silence, until the command, shout. And the silence that was their obedience became the shout that broke the walls. Obedience looks weak until it levels a city.
Silence feels powerless until it shakes the foundations. That's why Jericho matters. Because some of the strongest weapons in the kingdom make no sound until the moment they break everything. If you're walking right now and you see no movement, don't stop. If you're worshiping and nothing shifts, don't quit. Your Jericho is listening. Because the God who gave the command is the same God who timed the collapse.
Gideon, fewer, sharper, chosen. Not every soldier is meant to go to war with you. Gideon learned that the hard way. He started with 32,000 men. God said, "Too many." First, God removed the fearful. 22,000 walked away. Why? Because fear contaminates courage. And you can't fight a spiritual war dragging doubt behind you. Then God said, "Still too many." Next test, alertness. God watched how they drank water, who stayed ready, and who relaxed. Only 300 passed. Not the strongest, not the loudest, just the most aware. That's the blueprint. God doesn't bless crowds, He empowers clarity. He trims the fat until only the faithful remain. Purity over popularity. Precision over presence. In the spirit realm, sharper always beats bigger. Some of you are fighting with people God never assigned. You feel heavy, frustrated, blocked. Maybe it's not the enemy. Maybe it's your army. Gideon's victory wasn't about quantity, it was about clarity. And when he obeyed, even when it looked foolish, God flipped the battle with 300 voices and one strategy. Because when the ones around you are called, not just close, that's when walls fall. That's when the enemy runs. All battles point to Jesus. You've seen the patterns. You've studied the strategy. But every victory in the Old Testament wasn't the end of the story. It was a preview. David's courage, a glimpse of the shepherd king who would slay a bigger giant. Gideon's obedience, a shadow of a deliverer who would save with less, not more. Joshua's leadership, a faint echo of the one who'd lead us across the final river. They were warriors, but he is the king. And his battle wasn't with swords or armies. It was with sin, death, and hell itself. He didn't just show us how to fight. He showed us how to win. When Jesus said, "It is finished," it wasn't surrender. It was a battle cry, a declaration that the greatest war was over, and he won it alone. So when you read the Old Testament now, don't just see warriors. See witnesses, prophets, generals, carriers of the shadow, all pointing to the one true champion.
The enemy's tactics haven't changed. Still lies, still fear, still temptation, wrapped in half-truths. But here's what most people miss. God's battle plan hasn't changed either. The victories in the Old Testament weren't just about that generation. They were blueprints for this one. So now, when anxiety hits you at 2 a.m., when your thoughts spiral, when temptation knocks and whispers, "Just this once," you need more than inspiration. You need instructions. Every time you want to quit, every time you feel unworthy, every time the pressure says, "Break now," you're standing at a spiritual Jericho. You're facing a Goliath. You're being tested like Gideon. And in that moment, what you reach for decides everything. So reach for the playbook, open the word, find the pattern, copy the blueprint, because you're not called to survive, you're called to fight. This isn't motivation, this is marching orders. So don't spectate, don't scroll, don't say maybe later, because when the next battle comes, you won't have time to Google a sermon. You'll need fire already lit. Subscribe to Battle Ready Bible, because next time the enemy shows up, he should regret it.